8:05 that morning, Amara walked through the glass doors of Sterling Heights Corporation with a secret that had changed her entire world. She was 29, hardworking, and known by almost everyone in the company. For 6 years, she had built her career one long day at a time. She was the woman who arrived before her manager. The woman who stayed late when a project was behind. The woman who never complained when someone asked her to take on extra work. Her co-workers trusted her. Her managers respected her. Even the senior executives knew her name. But that morning, Amara did not feel like the confident woman everyone knew. She kept one hand over her stomach as she walked toward her desk. She was pregnant. Just a few weeks earlier, she had stared at the test in disbelief. She had cried, laughed, and then cried again. She and her husband had dreamed about having a child for years. Now that dream was real. But along with the happiness came fear. Sterling Heights was a demanding company. People were expected to give everything to their jobs. Amara had watched what happened to employees who needed time away for family problems. One woman had quietly disappeared from a major project after returning from maternity leave. Another employee had been passed over for promotion because management said he was too distracted by his children. Amara had noticed. She had told herself that her situation would be different because of her record. She had always delivered. She had never missed an important deadline. She had worked through sickness, exhaustion, and personal problems without allowing them to affect her performance. Still, a small voice inside her kept asking the same question. What happens when they find out? At 9:30, Amara finally made her decision. She would tell the CEO herself. She would not hide her pregnancy. She believed honesty mattered, especially in a company where she had given so much of herself. She took a deep breath and walked toward Daniel's office. Daniel Carter was the 42-year-old CEO of Sterling Heights. He was respected, feared, and known for making fast decisions. When Amara entered his office, he looked up from his laptop. "Amara, what can I do for you?" She closed the door behind her. For a moment, she could not speak. Then she smiled nervously. "I wanted you to hear something from me directly." Daniel leaned back in his chair. Amara slowly told him. She was pregnant. For the first few seconds, Daniel said nothing. Then he smiled. "Congratulations." Relief rushed through Amara. "Thank you." But the smile disappeared from his face almost as quickly as it had appeared. Daniel looked down at the documents on his desk. "How far along are you?" "Almost 8 weeks." He nodded slowly. "And when do you expect to start taking time off?" Amara's smile faded. "I haven't planned that yet. I'm still working on my schedule. I intend to keep everything on track." Daniel looked at her again. This time, his eyes were different. There was no warmth. Only calculation. "I see." Amara felt something tighten inside her chest. She tried to remain calm. "I want you to know that my work will remain my priority." Daniel gave a short nod. "Of course." But his voice sounded distant. Then his phone rang. He answered it briefly before looking back at her. "Amara, I have several things to handle today. We'll discuss this later." She nodded. "Of course." She turned toward the door. Just before she reached it, Daniel spoke again. "Please don't make any assumptions about your role going forward. We'll need to review everything." Amara stopped. Her heart sank. "My role?" Daniel avoided her eyes. "We'll talk later." She walked out without another word. Back at her desk, Amara sat quietly. Around her, phones rang, keyboards clicked, and employees laughed. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. At 10:17, her desk phone suddenly rang. "Amara," the receptionist said. "Mr. Carter wants to see you in his office." Amara's fingers froze above her keyboard. "Now?" "Yes. Immediately." She slowly stood. Her heart began pounding. She looked toward Daniel's office. The blinds were closed. For the first time that morning, Amara wondered if telling the truth had been the biggest mistake of her life. Amara stood outside Daniel Carter's office, staring at the closed door. Her heart was beating so hard that she could hear it in her ears. She had expected a conversation about maternity leave. Maybe Daniel wanted to discuss her schedule, her responsibilities, or how her work would be handled while she was away. She took a slow breath and knocked. come in." Amara opened the door. Daniel was sitting behind his large desk. But he was not alone. 2 senior managers sat across from him. Amara stopped. Her stomach tightened. She looked from one face to another. "Is everything okay?" Daniel pointed toward the chair. "Please sit down." She slowly sat down. One of the managers avoided looking at her. That frightened her more than anything. Amara folded her hands in her lap. "I thought we were going to discuss my maternity arrangements." Daniel leaned back. "We are discussing your future with the company." The words sounded strange. "My future?" Daniel nodded. "I spoke with the senior management team after our conversation this morning." Amara felt a coldness spread through her body. "You already discussed this." "We had to." She stared at him. "I only told you a few hours ago." Daniel's expression remained firm. "Exactly. And your situation has changed." Amara's hand slowly moved toward her stomach. "My situation?" "You're going to have a child," Daniel said. "That changes your availability. It changes your priorities." Amara swallowed. "I understand that my responsibilities will change, but my commitment to this company hasn't." Daniel shook his head. "Commitment isn't the only issue." Silence filled the room. Then he said the words that broke something inside her. "We can no longer depend on you the way we once did." Amara stared at him. For several seconds, she could not respond. She remembered every late night she had spent in that building. She remembered working until midnight before major presentations. She remembered missing family dinners because a report needed to be finished. She remembered answering emails on weekends. She remembered coming into work during holidays because her team needed her. And now, after 6 years, Daniel was telling her she could no longer be trusted. "Sir," she said quietly, "I have never given this company a reason to doubt me. I know your record." "Then why are we having this conversation?" Daniel looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Because things are different now." Amara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. "My pregnancy doesn't make me less capable." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The room became silent again. One of the managers shifted in his chair. Amara looked at him, hoping for some sign of support. He looked down at the floor. That silence answered her. Daniel reached for a folder on his desk. Amara stared at it. "What is that?" Daniel opened it. "Your employment termination documents." Her breath stopped. For a moment, the room seemed to disappear. "What?" "We've decided to end your employment." Amara's lips trembled. "Today?" "Effective immediately." She looked at Daniel as if he were a stranger. "I thought this was a discussion." "It was." "No." Her voice cracked. "This isn't a discussion. You already made the decision." Daniel said nothing. Amara slowly stood. She wanted to scream. She wanted to ask how he could do this after everything she had given the company. But she refused to beg. She refused to stand in front of him and plead for a job she had earned through years of hard work. She picked up her bag. "Is there anything else?" Daniel looked at her. "I'm sorry." Those words hurt more than she expected. Because they came too late. Amara walked out. When she reached her desk, the office suddenly became quiet. People watched her. Nobody knew what to say. Her hand shook as she began packing. A framed photograph. A notebook. A coffee mug. A small plant someone had given her years ago. She placed each item inside a cardboard box. One young employee approached her. "Amara." She looked up. The woman wanted to say something, but fear stopped her. Amara gave her a small smile. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Not even close. She lifted the box against her chest. As she walked toward the elevator, people moved aside. Some looked angry. Some looked heartbroken. Others looked away because they were afraid they could be next. The elevator doors opened. Amara stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, she looked back at the office. 6 years of her life were behind those doors. Her achievements, her friendships, her sacrifices, her future. Or at least the future she had believed was waiting for her. The elevator began moving downward. Amara lowered her eyes to the box in her arms. Then she placed one trembling hand over her stomach. Her baby was still there. Small. Innocent. Unaware that everything had just changed. A tear finally rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away. She had lost her job that morning. But somehow, it felt like she had lost much more. She had lost the security she had worked so hard to build for herself and her unborn child. And she had no idea that by the next morning, the man who had fired her would realize just how badly he had misjudged her. The walk home had never felt so long. Amara held the small cardboard box against her chest as she moved slowly down the busy sidewalk. Inside were the few things she had collected from 6 years at Sterling Heights. A photograph. A notebook. Her favorite coffee mug. A small plant. That was all. 6 years of hard work had somehow fit into one box. Every few steps, Amara looked down at it. She could still hear Daniel's words in her head. We can no longer depend on you. She wanted to believe he was wrong. But fear was already filling the space where confidence used to be. How would they pay the rent? What about her doctor's appointments? What about the vitamins she needed? What about the crib they had planned to buy next month? She had been saving money for the baby, but the savings were not enough to last forever. For the first time, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake by telling the truth. Maybe I should have kept quiet. The thought broke her heart. She had done nothing wrong. She had simply become pregnant. Yet she was the one walking home without a job. When she reached her neighborhood, she stopped outside a small grocery store. She looked through the window. Milk. Bread. Fruit. Everything seemed ordinary. But suddenly, even simple things felt expensive. Amara checked her purse. She had enough for what she needed that evening. But what about next week? She walked away. By the time she reached her mother's house, she had forced herself to stop crying. Her mother, Grace, opened the door. One look at Amara's face was enough. What happened? Amara tried to smile. Nothing. I'm just tired. Her mother looked at the box in her hands. Then she understood. You lost your job. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Grace pulled her into a hug. That was all it took. Amara finally broke. She cried against her mother's shoulder like a child. I told him the truth, she whispered. I thought he would understand. Grace held her tighter. You did the right thing. But now I don't know how we are going to manage. We will manage. What if I can't find another job? Then we'll find another way. What about the baby? Grace gently touched her daughter's stomach. Your baby needs a mother who knows her worth. Not a woman who spends her life begging someone to recognize it. Amara closed her eyes. Her mother's words helped, but they could not erase the fear. That evening, Amara returned home. She tried to act normal. She ate a little. She answered her husband's questions. She even smiled when he talked about the baby. But later, when the house became quiet, she opened the small box she had started preparing for her child. Inside was a tiny pair of white socks, a notebook filled with baby names, a list of things they still needed to buy, and a photograph of the nursery they had dreamed about. Amara sat on the edge of the bed. She stared at the list. Then the tears came again. She covered her face with both hands. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Across the city, Daniel was still sitting in his office. He looked at his schedule and moved on to the next meeting. To him, the decision was finished. He believed the company had protected itself from future problems. But outside his office, employees were already talking. They were shocked. They knew Amara's record. One trusted manager, Marcus, finally stepped into Daniel's office. Sir, I think you made a mistake. Daniel looked up. What kind of mistake? Amara. Daniel sighed. The decision is final. Marcus hesitated. She's one of the best people we have. Daniel leaned back. This is business, Marcus. We cannot make decisions based on emotions. Marcus looked at him for a moment. Then he quietly left. Daniel returned to his computer. He had no idea that the consequences of his decision had already begun. And by the next morning, he would finally understand that losing Amara was not simply an employee leaving the company. It was the beginning of a problem he could never have predicted. The next morning, Amara woke before sunrise. She had barely slept. Her mind kept returning to the same painful question. Asterisk, what am I going to do now? Asterisk. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea between her hands. Then her eyes moved toward the laptop sitting beside her. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. There was something Daniel did not know. Something almost nobody at Sterling Heights knew. Amara had been working on one of the most important projects in the company's history. For nearly a year, she had led the company's new supply management system. It was designed to reduce waste, stop costly mistakes, and save the company millions of dollars each year. Daniel had praised the project many times. He had shown the early results to investors. He had spoken proudly about the team behind it. But he never fully understood who had made the system work. Amara did. She knew every part of it. She knew where the data came from. She knew which departments were connected. She knew which numbers could not be trusted. And during the final weeks of the project, she had discovered something troubling. Several financial records did not match. At first, Amara thought they were simple errors. But the more she investigated, the more strange the numbers became. Payments had been approved twice. Invoices had been changed after approval. Money was moving through accounts that should not have been connected to the project. Amara had quietly started collecting evidence. She created copies of important records. She wrote down dates. She compared reports. She kept everything organized in a secure folder. She knew she could not accuse anyone without proof. There were too many innocent employees involved. One wrong accusation could destroy someone's career. So she kept investigating. She had planned to finish her report that week. Then she had told Daniel she was pregnant. And everything had changed. Now she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the folder on her screen. A bitter thought entered her mind. Asterisk, I could expose them. Asterisk. She imagined sending everything to the board. She imagined Daniel being forced to explain what had happened. She imagined the faces of the managers who had watched her leave the company without saying a word. For a few seconds, revenge felt good. Then Amara looked down at her stomach. She placed her hand gently over it. Her anger slowly became quieter. She thought about the kind of mother she wanted to be. One day, her child would ask her about difficult moments in life. She did not want to teach that pain should always be answered with destruction. She wanted to teach strength. She wanted her child to understand that dignity meant doing the right thing even when nobody was watching. Amara closed her eyes. No, she whispered. She would not destroy the company. Not yet. Instead, she would finish what she had started. She created a new folder. Then another. She separated the evidence into different sections. Financial records. Project documents. Approval reports. Email records. Payment histories. Everything had to be clear. Everything had to be backed by facts. She was no longer simply trying to protect herself. She was protecting people who had done nothing wrong. She was protecting the truth. And perhaps, without realizing it, she was also protecting the company that had just thrown her away. Across the city, Daniel was preparing for another busy morning. He had no idea that Amara possessed information that could change everything. He believed he had removed a problem. In reality, he had removed the one person who understood the problem better than anyone else. Amara closed the laptop and took a deep breath. Her eyes were still wet, but there was something different in her expression now. She was hurt. She was afraid. But she was no longer helpless. The woman who had walked out of Sterling Heights carrying a small cardboard box had not lost everything. She still had her knowledge. She still had the truth. And most importantly, she still had a choice. She could become bitter. Or she could become stronger. Amara looked once more at the folder on her screen. Then she whispered to herself, I will do this the right way. She had no idea that before the day was over, the first piece of evidence would reveal something far more dangerous than she had expected. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Sterling Heights at exactly 7:45. He walked through the lobby with the same confidence he had shown every day. His suit was perfectly pressed. His phone was filled with meetings. His calendar was packed. As far as Daniel was concerned, yesterday's decision was finished. Amara was gone. The company would move forward. At least, that was what he believed. At 8:12, his assistant rushed into his office. Sir, we have a problem. Daniel looked up. What kind of problem? It's the supply management project. Daniel frowned. What about it? Several reports aren't matching. Daniel leaned back. Then have the finance team correct them. They tried. His assistant hesitated. They can't figure out where the errors are coming from. Daniel's confidence weakened slightly. Call the project team. They're already working on it. And they're confused. Daniel stood. Within an hour, the situation became worse. A major shipment had been delayed because the system showed the wrong inventory numbers. 2 departments had received conflicting instructions. A report sent to an important client contained figures that did not match the company's internal records. Then another message arrived. The client was threatening to cancel its contract. Daniel stared at the email. That contract was worth millions. He immediately called an emergency meeting. Senior executives filled the conference room. Everyone looked worried. How did this happen? Daniel demanded. Nobody answered. Finally, one manager spoke. We are still trying to understand the system. Daniel's jaw tightened. You helped build it? Yes, sir. Then explain it. The manager looked down. Amara handled most of the technical structure. Silence. Daniel slowly looked around the room. Most of it. Another employee nodded. She designed the workflow. She also maintained the main data controls. Daniel felt something unpleasant in his stomach. Why wasn't I told this? Nobody answered. The truth was obvious. Everyone had assumed Amara would always be there. She had solved problems quietly. She had stayed late. She had fixed mistakes before they reached senior management. And because she made difficult work look easy, nobody noticed how much she was actually carrying. Daniel returned to his office. He opened the project files. For the first time, he began reading Amara's old reports carefully. There were warnings everywhere. One report mentioned possible data inconsistencies. Another warned that certain financial records needed deeper review. Another recommended additional controls before the final system launch. Daniel kept scrolling. The warnings continued. She had told them. Again and again. She had tried to protect the company. And they had ignored her. Daniel leaned back in his chair. His mind returned to yesterday. He remembered Amara standing in front of his desk. She had not screamed. She had not insulted him. She had simply looked hurt. He remembered her asking, "My pregnancy doesn't make me less capable." At the time, he had dismissed the words. Now they sounded different. He looked at the clock. Only 1 day had passed since he fired her. Yet the company already felt unstable. His assistant entered again. "Sir, the client wants an answer within 2 hours." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Tell them we are working on it." She nodded and left. Daniel remained alone. He looked at Amara's reports again. For the first time, a frightening thought entered his mind. What if firing her was the biggest mistake I have ever made? He immediately tried to push the thought away. But it would not disappear. He had believed Amara was replaceable. He had believed her pregnancy made her less dependable. He had believed the company could simply move forward without her. Now the truth was staring at him from the documents on his desk. Amara had not been a problem. She had been the person holding the system together. And Daniel had pushed her out at the exact moment the company needed her most. He stood and walked toward the window. Below him, employees hurried through the lobby. The company looked exactly the same. But Daniel knew something had changed. His confidence was gone. For the first time in years, he was afraid of what might happen next. Then his phone rang. He answered. The voice on the other end delivered one sentence that made his blood run cold. "Daniel, we found another discrepancy." He slowly closed his eyes. The crisis was not over. It was only beginning. And somewhere across the city, the woman he had fired was already holding information that could explain exactly what was going wrong. Daniel had been sitting in his office for nearly an hour. The city outside his window was busy, but he barely noticed it. His attention was fixed on one thing. Amara's files. He opened report after report, reading every page she had prepared during the previous year. At first, he expected to find ordinary project notes. Instead, he found warnings. Detailed warnings. Dates. Numbers. Names. Patterns. Amara had noticed unusual financial activity months earlier. She had marked several payments that did not match approved invoices. She had also noticed repeated changes in records after transactions had already been approved. Daniel's face became tense. He opened another file. There it was. A detailed risk report. Amara had written that if the problem continued, the company could lose millions. Daniel stared at the screen. She knew. The words escaped his mouth. She had known. And she had tried to warn them. He opened the next file. This one was even more shocking. Amara had already created a solution. She had designed a system that could track suspicious transactions and prevent certain records from being changed without proper approval. She had even prepared a step-by-step plan for implementing it. Daniel leaned back in his chair. The room suddenly felt smaller. Amara had not been waiting for someone else to solve the problem. She had been solving it herself, even while the company was preparing to fire her. Daniel remembered telling her that morning that the company could no longer depend on her. He felt a deep sense of shame. A knock came at the door. Marcus stepped inside. "Sir." Daniel looked at him. How long did Amara know about these problems? Marcus paused. Months. Why didn't anyone tell me? We thought she was handling it. Daniel looked down at the reports. Marcus continued. She was one of the most trusted people here. She solved problems before they reached your desk. Daniel said nothing. Marcus's voice became softer. She was also one of the most productive employees we've ever had. Daniel closed the file. For years, he had considered himself a strong leader. He made fast decisions. He demanded results. He believed that was what leadership meant. But now he wondered if he had confused strength with control. He had not studied Amara's performance before firing her. He had not asked whether she could continue doing her job. He had simply looked at her pregnancy and made an assumption. That realization hurt more than the financial crisis. Because the truth was simple. Amara had done nothing to lose his trust. He had simply stopped trusting her because she was going to become a mother. Daniel stood and walked toward the window. He remembered the way she had looked at him before leaving. She had not begged. She had not shouted. She had simply walked away. He suddenly understood why. Her silence had not been weakness. It had been dignity. Daniel picked up his phone. He found Amara's number. His finger hovered over the call button. Then he pressed it. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Finally, a message appeared. *I am not ready to talk. Daniel stared at the words. For a moment, he felt disappointed. Then he realized something important. She did not owe him an immediate response. He had taken away her security in one morning. He could not expect one phone call to repair that damage. Daniel placed the phone on his desk. He looked at Amara's reports one more time. Money could fix a financial loss. A new position could replace a job. But trust was different. He had broken something that could not be repaired with a contract. For the first time, Daniel understood what real accountability meant. It meant accepting that he had caused harm. It meant changing the way he led. And it meant proving through his actions, not his promises, that he had learned from his mistake. Daniel closed the file. But he did not close the problem. Somewhere out there, Amara was carrying a child and rebuilding a life he had disrupted. And if he wanted her forgiveness, he would have to earn it. For the first few days after losing her job, Amara felt lost. But slowly, something inside her began to change. She stopped asking, why did this happen to me? Instead, she started asking, what can I do now? One morning, she opened her laptop and updated her resume. She listed everything she had accomplished at Sterling Heights. The systems she had built. The projects she had managed. The money she had helped save. The problems she had solved. For years, Amara had never talked much about her achievements. She had simply done her work. Now, as she read her resume, she realized something. She had been underestimating herself. Her career had never belonged to Sterling Heights. It belonged to her. That same afternoon, her phone rang. It was a former colleague. "I heard what happened," the woman said carefully. "I'm sorry." Amara thanked her. Then came a surprising question. Would you consider working somewhere else? Amara sat up. Her former colleague worked with another organization that was looking for someone with Amara's exact experience. She promised to recommend her. Amara ended the call and stared at the phone. For the first time since being fired, she smiled. Maybe Daniel had closed one door. But he had not closed every door. Over the next few days, more opportunities appeared. A company wanted to interview her. Another asked about consulting work. Someone even suggested that she could start her own business. At first, Amara laughed at the idea. Then she thought about it seriously. She knew the systems. She understood business operations. She knew how to find problems before they became disasters. Maybe she did not need another company to decide whether she was valuable. Maybe she could build something of her own. Her pregnancy also began to feel different. At first, she had seen it as something Daniel might use against her. Now she saw it as a reason to become stronger. She placed her hand over her stomach. "I will build a better future for you," she whispered. Not because she wanted to prove Daniel wrong. Because she wanted her child to grow up knowing that difficult moments do not have to become the end of your story. Meanwhile, Daniel continued calling. Amara saw his name appear on her phone several times. She did not answer. She was not ready. Then one evening, another message arrived. I know an apology isn't enough, but I would like to speak with you. Amara stared at the screen. She thought about everything that had happened. The office. The termination papers. The cardboard box. The walk home. The fear. The tears. She could have ignored him forever. But something inside her told her that he needed to hear the truth from her. Not as an employee. Not as someone asking for her job back. But as a woman whose life had been changed by his decision. She finally typed a reply. I'll meet you. She put the phone down. Her hands were steady. This time, Amara was not walking into Daniel's office afraid. She was walking toward him with something she had not possessed when she left. Confidence. She no longer needed him to decide her future. She had already begun deciding it for herself. The cafe was quiet that afternoon. Daniel arrived 10 minutes early. For once, he did not care about his schedule. He only cared about the conversation ahead. When Amara walked through the door, Daniel stood. She looked different. Not because she had changed physically. Because she carried herself differently. There was confidence in her eyes now. "Thank you for meeting me," Daniel said. Amara sat across from him. "I didn't come here to get my job back." Daniel nodded. "I understand." For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then Daniel took a deep breath. "I was wrong." Amara looked at him carefully. "I was wrong to fire you." He did not try to explain. He did not mention company pressure. He did not blame the executives. He simply continued. "I judged you because you were pregnant. I made assumptions about what you could and couldn't do without giving you the chance to prove me wrong." Amara looked down at her hands. "Do you know what happened after I left?" Daniel shook his head. "I went home and calculated everything." Her voice trembled. Rent, doctor appointments, food, baby expenses. I had spent years building a stable life, and suddenly I didn't know if I could protect it. Daniel listened silently. "I kept asking myself if telling you the truth had been a mistake." Those words hit him hard. Amara continued. "But the worst part wasn't losing the money." She looked directly into his eyes. It was feeling like 6 years of hard work meant nothing. Daniel lowered his eyes. "You didn't just fire an employee," Amara said. "You made me feel like becoming a mother had made me less valuable." Daniel swallowed. "I know." "No," she said quietly. "I don't think you did. Not then." Silence filled the space between them. Then Daniel told her what he had discovered. He explained the problems inside the project. He told her about her old reports. He told her that the company had nearly suffered a massive loss. Then he said something that made Amara look surprised. "You were still protecting us." She said nothing. "Even after I fired you, you continued working on the evidence." Daniel's voice became quieter. "You could have destroyed us." "I could have." "Why didn't you?" Amara looked out the window. "Because innocent people would have suffered too." Daniel looked down. For the first time, he felt ashamed, not as a CEO, but as a man. He had treated her as disposable. Yet she had protected people who had not protected her. "I want to make this right," he said. He reached into his folder and placed several documents on the table. "I want you back." Amara looked at the papers. "Your old position is available." She said nothing. "I'll also give you a promotion, full compensation for the time you lost, and additional support during your maternity leave." Amara slowly pushed the papers back toward him. Daniel stared at her. "You don't have to decide today," he said. "I know." She paused. "But money cannot fix everything." Daniel nodded. "I know." Amara looked into his eyes. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. Daniel felt the weight of those words. She was willing to forgive him someday. But that did not mean she trusted him today. And he finally understood why. Regret could come in 1 second. Trust took time. Daniel had spent one morning destroying something. He might spend years proving he deserved another chance. Amara stood. "I'll think about your offer." Daniel nodded. As she walked away, he remained seated. For the first time, he did not feel like the powerful CEO of Sterling Heights. He felt like a man facing the consequences of his own decision. And he finally understood something he should have understood from the beginning. An apology could open a door, but only changed actions could keep it open. 3 days after their meeting, Amara returned to Sterling Heights. But this time, she did not walk in as an employee asking for another chance. She walked in as someone who knew her worth. Daniel met her in the conference room. "I've thought about your offer," Amara said. Daniel nodded. "I'll help the company." Relief appeared on his face, but not under the old conditions. His expression became serious. Amara placed a document on the table. "I want to lead a new employee welfare and professional development initiative." Daniel looked through the proposal. She wanted stronger protections for employees facing pregnancy or family responsibilities. She wanted clear promotion standards. She wanted workers to have a safe way to report problems without fear of losing their jobs. She also wanted managers trained to judge employees by their performance, not by assumptions about their personal lives. Daniel slowly closed the document. "I agree." And he meant it. Within weeks, Sterling Heights introduced new workplace policies. Employees who had once stayed silent began speaking. A young mother reported unfair treatment without fear. Another employee raised concerns about financial records. Others began sharing problems they had kept hidden for years. Daniel listened. That was the biggest change. He stopped assuming that being the CEO meant always having the answer. Sometimes, he learned, leadership meant asking questions. Sometimes it meant admitting you were wrong. And sometimes it meant listening to the person standing across the table from you. Amara returned to the company in her new role. She did not become respected because she was pregnant. She became respected because she had earned it. Her knowledge helped stabilize the troubled project. The solution she had designed before being fired helped the company uncover the financial problems and prevent further losses. Within months, the crisis began to fade. The company survived. But Daniel knew the financial recovery was not the most important victory. One evening, he stood outside his office and watched employees leaving for the day. He thought about Amara. He thought about the morning he had fired her. He had believed he was protecting the company. Instead, he had nearly damaged it. He had confused efficiency with leadership. He had mistaken control for strength. And he had forgotten something simple. A company was not built by buildings, computers, or contracts. It was built by people. People who needed to feel respected. People who needed to know their work mattered. People who needed leaders who saw them as human beings. Daniel finally understood that an apology alone could never erase what he had done. Real redemption required change. It required action. And every new policy, every honest conversation, and every employee who felt safe enough to speak became part of that change. Amara had not returned to prove Daniel wrong. She had returned because she believed the company could become better. And somehow, the woman Daniel once considered a weakness had become the person who taught him what true leadership meant. The greatest lesson was not how much money the company nearly lost. It was how easily a leader could destroy the people who helped build his success. And Daniel promised himself he would never make that mistake again. Months passed. The fear that had once followed Amara everywhere slowly became a distant memory. Her pregnancy had continued safely, and the company had changed in ways she never expected. Then, one quiet morning, everything changed again. Amara held her newborn baby in her arms. She looked down at the tiny face and smiled through tears. "You're finally here." The baby moved softly against her chest. Amara closed her eyes. For a moment, she remembered the day she had walked out of Sterling Heights carrying that small cardboard box. She remembered the fear, the humiliation, the uncertainty. She had believed her life was falling apart. But now, sitting there with her child in her arms, she understood something she could not have understood that day. Losing that job had not ended her future. It had forced her to build a new one. Her phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from Daniel. She opened it. It was simple. Congratulations, Amara. I wish you and your baby health, peace, and happiness. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I'm happy for you. Amara read it twice. There was no request, no business proposal, no mention of the company, no attempt to remind her of what he had done. Just respect. She placed the phone beside her. For the first time, she realized something surprising. She wasn't angry anymore. The memory still existed. She would never pretend that what happened was acceptable. But the pain no longer controlled her. Across the city, Daniel sat alone in his office. The company was doing well again. But he thought less about profits now. He thought about people. He remembered the day Amara had stood in front of him. He remembered looking at her pregnancy and deciding she was suddenly less dependable. That had been his greatest mistake. Motherhood had not made Amara weaker. It had revealed a strength he had failed to see. Her courage, her discipline, her loyalty, her ability to protect others even after she had been hurt. Daniel had once thought leadership meant making difficult decisions without emotion. Now he understood that good leadership required something else. Humanity. Back at home, Amara looked down at her baby. She thought about forgiveness. She had every reason to remain bitter. But she did not want to carry anger into her child's future. So she chose to forgive Daniel. Not because what he had done was acceptable. Not because the pain had never happened. She forgave him because she refused to let his mistake control the rest of her life. Amara kissed her baby's forehead. Outside the window, the morning sun slowly filled the room. She smiled. Once, a door had been slammed shut in her face. She had thought it was the end. Now she understood. It had been the beginning of her independence, the beginning of her courage, the beginning of a life she was no longer waiting for someone else to approve. She held her child closer and looked toward the future. This time, the future belonged to her. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Sometimes the cruelest rejection becomes the doorway to a better life. True strength is not revenge. True strength is rising above injustice without allowing it to destroy the goodness inside you.